You open the escrow account and directly transfer 25% of the amount that you're trying to delist. And then you give the detailed public announcement. Again, same 2 newspapers. Then instead of prospectus, we have letter of offer here. Just like the takeover code chapter also. Letter of offer is now going to be dispatched to all the shareholders of this company which is trying to get delisted. And then the bidding process will start. This bidding mechanism is open for 5 days. During this time, all the shareholders who want to sell their shares back to the company, they will then bid and they will give back their shares. After this bidding is done, one more public announcement is done to announce that the bidding process is over. Once the bidding process is over, you would have mentioned different prices as the public. Some people would have wanted 100 rupees per share. Some people would have wanted 120. Obviously, since the company is going to get delisted, people would want more money for their shares. So that final price that will be discovered will be called as the discovered price. This price will be the price which all these shareholders who are exiting the company will be paid. So finally, the company will ensure that at least 90% of the total issued shares of the company are now in the hands of promoters and not in the hands of the public. That is the aim. So you will be considered only delisted if minimum number of equity shares that are acquired through this process result in the promoter shareholding to go beyond 90%. Once that is achieved, your delisting is successful, and then you can pay the price and get the shares. Instead of now cancelling the shares will now belong to the promoters, because typically delisting is initiated by the promoter or the promoter group. Once this is done, the remaining public shareholders will be given one last chance. But if you want to continue, you can continue in the company for 1 year for the remaining shareholders. So if you feel like exiting the company in the next 1 year from the date of this delisting completing, you can still hand over your shares back and exit the company at the same time. So this is the 10-step process you do for doing this voluntary delisting from all the stock exchanges. Then we come to compulsory delisting. Here the company doesn't want to delist, but you are getting delisted because of some non-compliance or something bad that you did as a company, due to which there are some repercussions that are occurring here. So this decision of compulsory delisting will typically be made by a panel. This panel consists of 2 directors from the stock exchange, 1 representative from SEBI, 1 representative from Ministry of Corporate Affairs or ROC, and the executive director of either BSE or NSE. So this is a 5-member panel that will decide which company has done the contraventions against SEBI regulation before they publish the delisting order. If you have done any serious offenses, they will then publish this delisting order. Same logic, but this time 3 newspapers, 1 English, 1 Hindi and 1 vernacular language newspaper will be used to publish this delisting order. In which scenario is your company going to get delisted? There are a limited number of scenarios, but once this order is published, no further listing for 10 years. Any company that is getting delisted will not be listed again for a period of 10 years. The reasons for doing this compulsory delisting could be many. Whether you have not complied with SCRA Act, Securities Contract Regulation Act, promoters have done any non-compliances, you have not followed SEBI regulations, you have not followed a listing agreement of the stock exchange, or you have not followed Companies Act and there is some serious non-compliance in Companies Act due to which they feel your company should be delisted. So many of these reasons could be attributed to this compulsory delisting. If you're a small company though, you have much more flexibility, which is the last type of delisting, which is delisting for small companies. If you are a company which is smaller in size and you have a paid up capital of less than 10 crores, net worth of less than 25 crores as per the last date of the financial year, and you're infrequently traded. We have seen this definition before. If less than 10% of your shares are not getting traded on the stock exchange, then what's the point of getting listed, right? If nobody is showing interest in buying or selling your company's securities, then you become infrequently traded. If you satisfy these 3 conditions, you can then appoint a lead manager who will be a merchant banker, and then you can decide a price with the help of the merchant banker and give an exit opportunity to all your shareholders of the company, and ensure that 90% of public shareholding, and they have agreed for this particular delisting, same as before. If let's say 100 shares are in a company, 60 are in the hands of promoters and 40 are in the hands of the public. 90% of 40 will be 36. 36 public shareholders, people holding 36 shares, should agree that we will participate in this delisting. Only then you can go ahead and do the delisting. That is what is the meaning of 90%, which will then make the new shareholding as 60 plus 36. Promoters will now have 96 and public will only have 4. So what's the use? These 4 shareholders have 1 year time to sell their shares back to you, and now you will be completely a privately held company. That is what is happening here. So in this type of delisting, instead of typically going to the shareholders, passing special resolution, you satisfy the 3 criteria. You take the in-principle approval from stock exchange, you appoint a lead manager, and you take the shares and ensure that you give the public a exit opportunity and you delist your securities. from this, as a stock exchange, if a stock exchange feels that there is either consecutive losses for your company in the last 3 years, or your trading has remained suspended for your shares in the last 6 months, or if the promoters have been convicted under any law, if your securities are infrequently traded below 10% in the last 3 years, or if you have given false addresses and they cannot trace your company at all, or your public shareholding has fallen below the minimum 25% limit under minimum public shareholding. Under each of these conditions, you will be delisted by the stock exchange itself, by the panel that we discussed before, the 5-member panel. They will ask you to appear in front of them and they will pass an order for delisting your company. Even then, you have to follow the same compulsory delisting process. You will have to ensure that you don't apply for listing for another 10 years. So the grounds or reasons for compulsory delisting are basically these. So those are the 3 major varieties of delisting. Voluntary delisting from all stock exchanges, some stock exchanges, or voluntary delisting by a small company, or in some other cases you also have compulsory delisting. If any of these conditions is met, then you will go under this compulsory delisting route. So that is how this thing typically works for delisting chapter. The 3 chapters done. Now let's move on to insider trading. Under insider trading, you have definitions which are very important for this particular chapter. First, you have the definition of an insider. Any person who has access to unpublished price-sensitive information, or any person who is a connected person. These 2 people are said to be insiders. And when this insider does trading, trading means buying, selling, subscribing, dealing, or agreeing to do any of these, that is called as insider trading. This connected person means any person connected to the company, anybody who has reasonable access to the company. So when should he be connected? Connected in the last 6 months, when he is associated directly or indirectly with the company, either as an employee or as a director or you have any professional relationship with the company. Let's say you are the auditor or you are providing legal advice to the company. Such people are called as connected persons. Deemed to be connected persons are also there. They are deemed to be connected whether they are connected in the last 6 months or not. And this definition is one of the biggest definitions included. If you remember, we had done once a definition which had relatives, so your siblings, parents, etc. Whose siblings, connected persons, relatives are deemed to be connected person. Holding subsidiary associate company of the connected person is also deemed to be connected. Holding subsidiary associate company of this company in which the insider trading is happening, that is also deemed to be connected. Intermediary, that is primary and secondary market intermediary, they are also deemed to be connected. Any investment company related to this company is connected. Any other mutual fund or CIS which we studied today, they are deemed to be connected. And any other bank that has given loans and any other business where the immediate relative is working and this business holds 10% in the company, then such a business will also be deemed to be a connected person. So these are some of the deemed to be connected persons under SEBI insider trading regulations. All these people who are deemed to be connected persons will be typically investigated for insider trading. So what is insider? Any person who has access to unpublished price sensitive information, which is UPSI. So UPSI includes financial results of the company. It includes dividend information when the company declares dividend. It includes any change to the company's capital structure. If the company is planning to do any mergers, demergers, etc. That also is included to be price sensitive information. And any change in KMP or key managerial personnel. This 5 information is deemed to be UPSI. So you can call them deemed UPSI. Whenever such information is floating around in the company, you can expect that some insider trading may be occurring there. So should they do insider trading? They should not. So insider should not provide access, allow access, communicate any UPSI. That is the duty of the insider. And if any person does this, that is considered to be insider trading. Unless it is a statutory obligation, you will not be sharing any UPSI with anyone. For doing this, the board of directors of the company may ask you to execute a NDA, non-disclosure agreement, or a NCA, non-confidentiality agreement. Now, certain information under these agreements should be kept always hidden depending on what is written in the agreement, that information should never be disclosed to any person apart from you. So if you have gotten access to such information, you keep it with yourself. Now, how do they implement this insider trading regulations? They will first maintain database. Maintain database of persons having access to UPSI. So it is company's duty to number one, maintain this database. The board of directors may be required to execute agreements, confidentiality agreements, or NDAs, depending on which employee gets access. The company's duty is also to ensure that they close the trading window and they prohibit any trading in the company's securities. Whenever there is this unpublished price sensitive information floating around in the company, because people can misuse such information and they can make huge amounts of profits while they are doing this. So promoters of the company, directors of the company, people who are in high positions typically have a lot of access to this price sensitive information. So they should not be allowed to trade whenever this information is floating around in the company. So how do they implement this? By the process of pre-clearance. So whenever any person who's an insider, if they want to trade in companies' securities, they'll have to take approval from whom? From compliance officer, which will be you, the company secretary in most situations. And if the approval is not given, they cannot trade. They can also obtain a trading plan every year if they are planning to sell their shares. Suppose they are organizing their children's marriage next year, they might need a lot of money, so they can pre-approve certain trading plans. So this is pre-approval of future transactions. And you have to promise to the company that you will not have access to any UPSI while you are selling the securities or buying the securities using this trading plan. And this should be intimated in advance to the compliance officer, which will again be the CS. This trading plan will be for 12-month period, and you should also ensure that the trading commences only after 6 months of the submission of the trading plan. So that is another way in which insider trading is mitigated to some extent. But despite all of this, there are still some disclosures that you will have to do every year. The first disclosure will be done by the promoter or the promoter group. So if you're the promoter of the company, you will initially disclose your shareholding in the company within 7 days from becoming the promoter or getting appointed. The second disclosure is also by the promoter. So promoter or the promoter group shareholders will now ensure that whatever transactions that they deal in, if the value of the transactions exceed 10 lakh rupees per quarter, then they have to disclose in 2 days or 2 working days of the transaction. They should disclose the same if their trade exceeds 10 lakh rupees. If you are a director, then same initial disclosure and same promoter disclosure. So same as above 1 and 2. If you are a KMP, then also same as 1 and 2. If you are any other designated person, if you are an important officer of the company, then only 2 will apply to you. And any other connected person, which we saw in the beginning, connected persons also will have to make sure that they disclose their transactions from time to time within 2 working days, which is again same as 2. And company will then disclose the same from 1 to 6. They will also send a copy within 2 working days to the stock exchanges. So what and all do you have to ensure? You have to ensure that once you become appointed in a company, either as a promoter or as a director or as a KMP or as a designated person, within 7 working days of your appointment, you intimate how many shares you hold in the company, and then as the time goes on, you will then have to intimate every transaction above 10 lakh rupees. So these are your initial and continual disclosures. If you are an informant, let's say you get information that somebody is doing insider trading, then you can go ahead and inform SEBI. This informant can submit 2 types of information: original information or voluntary information. And you will then also have to sign the disclosure form that you are informing, because many companies will not disclose the insider trading that is happening inside. You have to submit this to SEBI so that SEBI can protect your identity and protect you from these very powerful people who are doing insider trading. The format for this is given under Schedule D of SEBI Insider Trading Regulations, and you don't have to reveal your identity if you feel like. If you feel you will be under threat, you need not disclose the identity. If you are successful in getting the insider trading transaction caught by SEBI, you can also get incentives and rewards. So that is another thing that you can keep in mind. And every company, to ensure that all the information relating to UPSI is kept safe, they will then have to create a code of conduct to keep all this data safe from all these insiders. So that is called as the code of conduct, and code of conduct shall be also called as the code of fair disclosure. Under this code of fair disclosure, good practices and how UPSI will be handled, who will be the compliance officer, how will you disclose information to them, what to do when you have access to UPSI. All these things will be written under this code of fair disclosure, which will be put up on the company's website. And every listed company should create the code of fair disclosure for the company and code of conduct for their employees and insiders. This is what insider trading is all about, and we already know the penal provisions. 3 times the profit made or 25 crores, whichever is higher, with a minimum penalty of 10 lakh rupees. So the initial disclosure and continual disclosures for any transaction beyond 10 lakhs, that is the ultimate compliance under this chapter. All these records are maintained for 3 years by the company, and the compliance officer will always monitor all the trading in the company's securities from time to time. So that is the main duty of the compliance officer under these regulations of insider trading. So to summarize, who is an insider? What is trading? Who is a connected person? Who is deemed to be connected? What should the insider not do? What is the company's duty? How to pre-clear a transaction? How to get a trading plan approved? What are the disclosures involved in this chapter? And as an informant, what can you do in addition to the company creating this code of conduct? That is what you need to remember from the perspective of insider trading. That brings us to the last chapter, which is LODR regulations. LODR regulations are actually quite straightforward, and they are very similar to Companies Act compliances. For example, audit committee should be headed by the independent director, or board meeting should happen 4 times a year. Annual report should have these disclosures. All of these things are mentioned typically in the LODR regulations. That is, I think, chapter 11. So this is nothing but your extension of the listing agreement, just a list of compliances. That's all you need to remember from this particular chapter. We have list of common obligations for all the companies that are listed in India. So LODR full form is listing obligations and disclosure requirements. So listing obligation means whenever a company signs an agreement with a stock exchange to list their securities, that agreement is called listing agreement. Only then you become listed company. Then you do the IPO and list your securities. Once you do this, you have to follow LODR regulations. That is the sequence of events here. Company can issue many types of securities. Company can issue equity shares, whether they are convertible or non-convertible. They can issue ADR, GDRs and IDRs. They can issue non-convertible securities. They can also issue units of mutual fund and CIS if they are the sponsor of any of these entities. So all these entities have to follow certain common obligations. They are called as common obligations for listed company entities. The first obligation is appoint compliance officer. This compliance officer should be a qualified company secretary, and he should be appointed by all listed companies. This is the first common obligation for all companies. Second common obligation is appoint registrar and share transfer agent who will ensure that they cooperate with all the other intermediaries and ensure that your share transfers are taking place on time. Third, you have to preserve all the records and the documents for at least 8 years. This is the third set of common obligations for everybody. Some documents should be preserved permanently. They are permanent in nature. Some of them you can maintain electronically. You also have to ensure that if you pay any dividend or interest, you only pay them through banking channels. You don't pay them in cash anymore, and you will only use the NEFT method of payment for making any payments of dividend or interest. Next obligation for all listed companies is they should ensure that they redress investor complaints, especially through scores. Always ensure that you make the fees payment to stock exchanges on time. Don't delay in making any fee payments to these stock exchanges. And this is something that you have to ensure for all listed entities. These are your 6 basic common obligations for listed companies. Now we come to a few advanced ones, which start with number 1, composition of board of directors. So board of directors should have at least 1 women director and at least 50% of the board of directors shall comprise of non-executive directors. This is nothing but an extension of Companies Act. And 1 independent women director is required for top 1000 listed companies. This is in relation to composition of the board. In this board of directors, Your chairman can be executive director or non-executive director, right? So let's say you have your total board, collectively called as board of directors. 50% of them should be non-executive directors. One woman director is also required. If your chairman or chairperson is non-executive director, then minimum 1/3 of the board can be non-executive. But if the chairman is executive director, then minimum 1/2 of the board should be non-executive director. What if your chairman is a non-executive director but a promoter? Then also the above rule applies. So this is what is your composition of board of directors. Top 2000 companies should have at least 6 directors in total, minimum. We already know the rules relating to meetings of the board of directors. That is board meetings. First is board composition, second is board meetings. Board meetings happen 4 times a year with a maximum gap of 120 days. The maximum age of non-executive directors can be 75. And if you want to appoint anybody above 75, you need to pass a special resolution. Quorum of board meeting, you already know, is 1/3 or 2, whichever is higher. But you should ensure that at least one independent director is also present if you are a listed company. So there is nothing to explain in this chapter as such. This is only a set of compliances that you have to follow, and all the compliances collectively will apply to all listed companies. Next is committees. So I'll give you a brief gist. Many committees like audit, nomination and remuneration committee, stakeholder relationship committee, risk analysis and management committee, etc. Audit committee typically should have 3 directors. 2/3 should be independent, and chairman of the audit committee, along with all members, should be financially literate. Chairman should be an independent director, and he should be present in the AGM to answer the shareholder queries. Audit committee also meets 4 times a year, and 120 days gap between 2 meetings. Quorum remains the same. Instead of 1 independent director, at least 2 independent directors should be present in the audit committee. For nomination committee also, the committee should have 3 directors, and the chairman should again be an independent director. All the directors should be non-executive directors. Committee need not meet 4 times a year. Committee only meets once a year. So quorum remains the same. This time quorum doesn't have 2 independent directors. It only has 1. Now you have risk management committee. Risk management committee, on the other hand, is quite similar to the previous committee. In the risk management committee, you again have majority of independent directors. 3 minimum directors in the risk management committee. Again, chairman should again be a non-executive director. Meeting of this committee this time happens 2 times a year. So like this, you have committee related compliances also. I'll just send a checklist for these compliances that you can memorize. In this chapter, pretty much there is nothing to understand. There is only a lot of things to memorize here. It's a memory-oriented chapter. So if you can understand all the compliances pretty much, you should be good to go for this particular chapter. So you have about 15 to 20 compliances like these. Annually, every year, listed company should give a intimation of who the compliance officer is, whether they have appointed the share transfer agents, and whether they have maintained the records for 8 years. Quarterly, they should give investor complaint statement. Whatever is given in scores, based on that data, you have to submit that. You have to also file quarterly financial results within 45 days, and you have to give advertisement in the newspapers within 48 hours. So those are the set of compliances that you need to do for the quarter. Half yearly, also there are a few compliances. Any related party transactions should be disclosed on a half yearly basis, and statements of changes in assets and liabilities as well as your cash flow statement will be sent on a half year basis. Annual compliances are also there. Annual compliances include compliances on maintenance of your company website, issuing compliance certificate, ensuring that you have recorded the book closure of your securities. Top 1,000 companies should at least have one women independent director. Top 1,000 companies should also obtain insurance for their directors. Top 1,000 companies should have a risk management committee compulsory. And top 1,000 companies should also have a dividend distribution policy disclosed on their website. Whereas top 2,000 companies, in addition to this, should have six directors in total, which we have seen. And the quorum will be, instead of 1/3 or 2, it will be 1/3 or 3. That will be the quorum for top 2,000 companies in India. So that is all this chapter is all about. Set of compliances that are required to be followed by in general. So a lot of memory is required for this chapter. So do this chapter always at the end. Not a lot of weightage for this chapter at all. Maximum 4 or sometimes 5 marks is all that you will get from the 11th chapter. So that brings to a conclusion the remaining chapters that were left over for our paper. So thank you all for attending the session. I know we couldn't do it evening, but I unfortunately had another class, so we had to prepone it. Hopefully the rest of the chapters have been understood clearly. If you need me for any clarifications or doubts, my numbers are already available with you. You can get in touch. Try to solve as many question papers before the exam independently with the answer key. Try to buy a good guideline answer or scanner, which will help you with solving question papers. Studying and remembering compliances is only going to get you halfway. People who clear this exam are only those who practice question papers as much as possible. So don't be stuck with just studying all the time. Also prepare how to write an exam, because it's a written examination. Many times people with a lot of knowledge end up not clearing this exam only because they are not used to writing the answers. They are used to explaining the answers to others, but that is not going to get you through this exam. Make sure that you practice writing. That is the most important skill. So if you can solve even one question paper per day from 2018 onwards, you should be able to solve almost all possible questions which have been asked in the last 5 years, and that should be sufficient enough to get you past the 50 marks. Once you do that, then you can maybe prepare and study more and revise and then get the 60 or 70 whenever it is possible. But if you're just gonna memorize, study from the notes or the different books that you have, and you're gonna just go and write the exam, you will be in for a rude awakening. So let's not do that. Let's practice as many question papers as you can.